Welcome, everybody, to the afternoon of day two. As Addie was describing this course, I was thinking I should have had this course a long time ago, and I could probably use it now. I wish I could stay, but thank you anyway. As Addie said, my colleague Mike O'Neill had hoped to be here, but he got delayed in New York and was not going to get here until Friday. So I happened to be in the air already, so he asked me to step in. So what you'll see right now are unprepared remarks. I apologize for that. This is a leadership academy, and Addie asked me to give a few thoughts on leadership. When I first started out after university, I didn't give a single thought to leadership. In fact, it took decades for me to even realize that leadership is important. Where leadership really becomes something that you know is critical is in bad times. In good times, you can get away with almost anything, but in bad times, leadership makes a difference. And when I say leadership, I'm not talking about the people in charge. What I'm talking about is how people treat each other, how people treat the people that work for you, how you treat people that you work with, people you don't work with, your clients, your customers, anybody you deal with is all about leadership, and it's all about how you comport yourself and the values that you have and the values that you convey while you interact with all these people. I know you know all that. You've been here for a day and a half, so that's probably slightly repetitive for you. At American Express, we have, over the past, I would say, 2 decades, increasingly viewed leadership as both an art and a science. And it's something that's taken very, very seriously at the company. As with all major organizations, all major bureaucracies, there has to be a way of evaluating people's performance. We've got, we're smaller than we used to be. We have 10,000 employees worldwide. You can't just do this by sort of making up how people are doing and rewarding them accordingly. We do reward on performance, but there has to be a fair way to do it. So we divide the way we look at people into 2 categories. One, there's people's goals, the kind of things that they're expected to accomplish during a year at work. And they range from all sorts of things. If you're in business, it's financial. If you're in other things, there are other kind of goals. But specific things you have to do, and you're judged on how well you do that. The second thing we judge on is leadership. So there's this G rating for goals and an L rating for leadership. And you can do very, very well on your goal rating and poorly on your leadership. And if you don't fix that, you don't get to work at our company anymore. And there have been several cases of people who are brilliant at business. They make a lot of money for the company, but they treat people very badly. And they end up losing their jobs because there is a recognition that bad leadership traits, bad leadership practices eventually is going to erode the profitability of the company. People don't want to work for a company that just is nasty. And they don't want to work for somebody who's less than inspirational, which is to say, not a nice person to work for. So over the past couple of decades, American Express more and more got into this concept of leadership. And you heard from YC Ko, who's the country executive in charge here in Hong Kong yesterday, I hope, that we decided more than a few years ago to, as part of our philanthropic efforts around the world, to get involved in talking to people like you in the non-governmental organization sector about how leadership can help. Because leadership helps everywhere. It helps in business, it helps in families, it helps in buses. I mean, leadership is just important. I can go on and on about this, but I don't think I will. I think we should get some Q's and A's. The other thing Addie asked me to talk about is the transition from government to the private sector. And I went from one very large bureaucracy, which is the United States government, to a very small bureaucracy. And the one thing I noticed is that businesses don't do bureaucracy very well. They need more bureaucracy. Being bureaucratic is sort of an insult if you're in the private sector. Somebody say, oh, she's just too bureaucratic. You know what? Bureaucracy works. Bureaucracy is a way of organizing something to make sure it works smoothly. People know what the processes are, the procedures. If you're a large organization and you don't have a bureaucracy, you have a problem. That doesn't mean the bureaucracy should get in the way of getting things done, but it's a way to get things done. And I think probably every single person in this room has a lot more experience with that than I have, so I won't go on about that. But there is a transition going from the private sector to the public sector. You don't notice it when you're going through it. It just feels a little crazy, but eventually you realize there are differences, and there's good and bad in both. By and large, well, this is being filmed, so it's going to be used against me. People in the government sector, people in the public sector are by and large, I think, nicer than people in the corporate sector. People in the private sector, in the public sector, are motivated by, I think, better things. There are a lot of people who are in the corporate world who are just doing it to get rich and make a lot of money. That motivates them. Fine. I mean, it makes society better, the world better. But people don't go into government to make a lot of money, not unless they're corrupt. But in most countries, you can't make a lot of money. But in general, it's just a different attitude. But they're very, very smart people in both, and there are reasons to do. There are reasons I'm not trying to discourage anybody from going into the private sector, but that's one difference I notice. And what's important when you make a transition from one area to another is to recognize that you are making a transition. So you have to look for things that are different and understand that something going on is not the way you would expect it to be going on, why it's happening, and just be aware. And this may be partially what you're talking about by your bicultural or whatever that was, that cultural intelligence. Leadership has become a science. There are a lot of very smart people who look at it, and they actually there's a lot of science and method behind the madness of leadership. Somebody must have talked to you. I can't remember what they're called anymore because I'm not a leadership scientist, but different ways of managing different people based on both the individual and the situation. It might be called situational leadership, or something like that. But there's a lot. It's a big industry now. These people do it for a living, but it's a valid industry. It's a valid science, and it's one of the things they also teach in business schools. I never went to business school, but I'm told they teach that at business schools, the science of leadership. And it's a very important way that large organizations ensure that they're effective. You can't just, even the military can't order people to do things. There's got to be, it's easier for the military, but there's got to be followership. You've got to have the people who follow the leaders or the employees or whoever they are to actually want to do what the organization wants them to do. And there's a science of leadership now behind it. And it's not just being nice to people or being tough with people. It's understanding what motivates people and understanding how to get the best out of people and how that will make it much easier to achieve common goals. That's right. That's right. Those skills have changed. And as I mentioned earlier, leadership is taken very, very seriously now. You can get fired for being a bad leader. And even if you're delivering on your profit goals and all of that, you can, in a lot of organizations, including ours, you will get fired if you are a terrible leader. It's that important. I fear I may have been overdramatic on the firing part. People get fired for being bad to other people. You don't get fired for being shy or not speaking up. It's people who are basically abusive in the workplace, and that's just people who don't treat others with respect. So to your fundamental question of are leaders born or are leaders made, I think leaders are born. However, there's all different kinds of leaders. You don't need to be a charismatic politician to be a leader. You can be a very quiet, thoughtful, shy person, but somebody that other people respect and want to follow and are a leader in their own way. So leaders are, and you're born with these traits. Everybody's born with different traits, and you use what you have. And a lot of people have good traits. I mean, I think almost everybody's born with a lot of good traits, and you deploy the ones that are your strengths. And in a lot of cases, combined with your knowledge, your experience, and the role you're in, you can make that work for you. And then, so leaders are born, but leaders can be improved too. You know, I remember starting, not that I'm a leader, but I survived in corporate America for many, many years. I remember thinking, The biggest shock or the biggest revelation to me was that somebody once told me that I was making a big mistake because I was going around treating people the way I wanted to be treated. And the way I wanted to be treated apparently didn't work for everybody. So, I mean, I don't mind being teased. I don't mind being made fun of in public. A lot of people don't like that, and I was doing that. And that was years and years ago when I first started working at American Express. Somebody told me, says, you got to stop this. You got to start treating people the way they want to be treated. And I know that sounds simple, and you've probably been doing that your whole lives, but for me, that was a real wake-up moment for me. But so you can be improved all the time, and you know, good leaders do improve all the time. And it's not that nobody's perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect leader. There's always something new, changing circumstance, different people you're leading. There's always something different to be fine-tuned or worked on if you're a leader.